Am I live? Hey guys, sorry I'm a bit late. I was trying to catch up on the Johnny Depp trial. I was actually swimming when I saw Amber Heard was testifying. And the reason I was swimming was I was led to believe the power is going to be going out for 2 hours this evening, and then it just didn't. So that's why I was at the gym. Otherwise, I would definitely have been at home working, but I'm glad I went to the gym. Good to see you, Karina, Sharon Lynn, Nisi, Yvonne Phillips, Paddy. Have I missed anyone? I don't think so. Okay, so I was thinking of postponing this because of the Johnny Depp trial, but it seems like my timing was pretty good. Pretty much the time that the trial ended was pretty much the time that this live was supposed to start. Real Batman, Amy Hall, good to see you guys. So can I ask you guys, how many of you guys have been watching Amber Heard's testimony? Before we get going with Vincent van Gogh. Any of you been watching it or not your cup of tea? Robbie Robin, good to see you. Sharon says she's been watching it. Robbie Robin says not yet. True Jedi Forever, good to see you. So Sharon, something that kind of surprised me was just how expressive and emotional and talkative Amber Heard has been. She, you know, like at 1 minute it was like she was giving the scenario, and you kind of think, wow, this is like a bombshell. But then there was another one, and then they sort of blurred into one another. She gave so many, right? Did you have that kind of impression? Paddy says, I saw a few snippets. Yeah. Amy says, I've only seen what you have posted. Okay. So I'm going to kind of do an analysis of that. I do think it's quite interesting. I do think whatever you might think or whatever other people might think, I do think Amber Heard's testimony, whatever it is going to be the most damaging. Or either you can say it's not very damaging or you can say it is, but of all the other experts, of all the other testimony, I reckon her testimony is going to be by far the most damaging. How damaging, that's kind of going to be the question. Yvonne Phillips says, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah, I don't know if anyone was counting, but I saw there was 580,000 people in chat. 586,000 people were watching at a certain point. That's moving towards 600,000, well over 500,000. I think that's the most people I've ever seen in chat on YouTube. Have you guys seen 1 million people in chat or 1 million people watching? Have you guys seen that before? Anyway, it's pretty impressive, and I'm kind of not surprised that you put out a video on John Ramsey and it doesn't even make it to 300 views. So yeah, the interest in this case is extraordinary, and I think instead of condemning it and instead of shaking your head at it, I think one's got to ask, why does it resonate so widely? Why is this so wildly popular? And I think the answer is to do with our own narcissism. We are celebrity culture. We are YouTube culture, but we've also an extremely narcissistic society at this point. And in a weird way, we explore our narcissism through this case. We look at the excesses that these people are responsible for, and we are amused by it, we're disgusted by it, we're entertained by it, we're interested in it, whatever. And I think there's also a certain amount of voyeurism. Some of it is we may have feelings towards one or the other actor. We may feel attracted to one or the other actor. We may feel that one or the other actor represents us, or whatever. And so there's all sorts of projection, transference, voyeurism going on. And obviously it's going on such a massive scale that it starts to sort of become like an Ouroboros. The more people that it sucks in, the more people that it sucks in, kind of thing. So it's just quite an interesting phenomenon. I also think the subject matter is something that we can all identify with, which is relationships that don't work out, and the one person blaming the other person, and so on. You know, who's on your side and who's not on your side, and who supports your story and who doesn't support your story, and what do you tell your parents or what don't you tell your parents, and what do family members think of the whole thing. So the whole drama is something that is very identifiable, very accessible, and yet not. It's playing out in a netherworld of substances and wealth and celebrity that most of us are not. We're not members of that exclusive club. And I think that is a big draw card is, you know, what is it like to be part of that lifestyle? Well, this is a big window into it, right? Thanks for ordering the TCRS notebook. I hope it arrives quite soon. True Jedi Forever says, I'm definitely snooping in his life. Yvonne Phillips says, also the battle of the sexes is played out here. Yeah, very much so. You've also got a bit of an interesting dynamic in the power struggle of a sort of well-known actor, sort of a, you could almost say, veteran actor, and then an up-and-coming actress, and the one has a much bigger fan base than the other, but the one is also sort of over the hill. You know, was he over the hill before these allegations? It's debatable, but the other actress definitely not over the hill. She's going up the hill, kind of thing. So there are different parts and points of their career. Anyway, I'm sure you guys didn't come here to hear, a lot of you didn't come here to hear about the case, but I do think it's interesting to think about why it resonates with so many people. What is it touching on, you know, in most people or in a lot of people? Amy says, I've only recently started watching Johnny Depp's movies just before this court drama. I've got to say, I don't know if someone said, do you know who Amber Heard is? I don't know if I could have answered that. I'd actually seen her in the movie, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you her name. Now, of course, I know her name. I'd also seen The Rum Diary, but I didn't actually know I'd seen it. And I didn't know that was Amber Heard in The Rum Diary, but they both are pretty attractive characters in that story, pretty sexy characters. Okay, so we almost at about 10 minutes, not too many of you in chat, but not even half the normal number. So I'm going to kind of cut to the chase. I'm going to give you the end game in what we're going to go through. So we're going to deal now with Van Gogh's life in Paris. So remember we started in I think it was Den Haag. We started in what's Den Haag? The Hague, where he was working at Groupil. Then he went to London. Then he's moved back to Paris. And incidentally, he's not done with England. He's actually going to go back to England at the end of this Paris period, right? So he's going to go back there, and then he's going to come back, I think, to the Netherlands. So, but the thing I want to kind of emphasize is at the end of this period we're dealing with now, it's basically a year. It's from about the 31st of May, 1875 to the 4th of April, 1876. So around about 11 months. And in that period, Vincent van Gogh is sort of making a transition from working in London, but also the circumstances of London. And I kind of put the question out on Patreon. I said, you know, what do you think he's going to do, and what do you think his feeling is going to be, having been infatuated and it didn't really work out? And so he's kind of leaving London a bit deflated, a bit disenchanted, a bit lovelorn, right? And he was, I think, quite unhappy anyway, but the relationship not working out made it even worse. And so he's now leaving London and he's going to Paris. How do you think he's going to get over his lovelornness, right? And somebody said, is he going to be visiting ladies of the night or something like that? Not a bad answer, but I think, and it's possible that he did do that. He doesn't say so in his letters, but I think the short answer is that he basically kind of turns to religion. He basically becomes a lot more religious in Paris, and that sets the stage for him eventually going into the ministry. So to me, it's a kind of a classic cliche. I'm just saying it's happened more than once in the history of the world. Someone gets their hopes on somebody else. It doesn't work out. They're very hurt, and then they turn to God, and then they dedicate their lives to God. And in a way, you could argue that he's running away from real life, running away from the travails and the slings and arrows. In another way, you might say you're putting petty things behind you. Love and work is petty. The things of this earth are petty. The things of God are all important. But as you'll see, that Van Gogh doesn't stick to it. So although he is very, very idealistic, he ends up not sticking to his own brief. So he wants to become a pastor, and then he eventually abandons that as well. And then he ministers to people through his art. That's how he sees it. So in other words, what is actually happening through all of these phases of his life is he's actually finding himself. He's finding his feet. He's finding that working as an art dealer in London isn't a good fit. It's not who he is. Then he tries the pastoral, and he finds that's not quite who he is either, and it's quite limiting. And then he does something else. But the part that I want to emphasize with you guys, when we're about to get to those letters, is he will come out of Paris. He will leave Paris, having quit his job at Goupil, and he will become an assistant teacher. Now, I don't know whether you can actually honestly call this a job, because he is actually not paid. I don't know if you can call a job that you do a job if you're not paid for it. But in any event, he travels back to England at the end of the Paris period, and he becomes an assistant teacher. So he's kind of done with the art world in a sense. He goes to Ramsgate. It's a seaside resort town then, I think, of about 12,000 inhabitants. And I think so he's provided with room and board, and he didn't really know too much about where he was going, but he was going to be teaching maths and French for no salary. And what that's already indicative of is the phase that would follow after that, which is that he would be a preacher also for actually a very low salary, and then I think for a while for no salary either. And so that these two periods basically are preludes to him being a penniless artist, right? So in other words, he has a job, right? He has a job, he has a career, he's making a good living. Then he quits that to teach for free, and then he quits that to be basically a pastor for free, and then he quits that to kind of be a painter who sells no paintings. And so if you're going to make the argument that Van Gogh committed suicide because he didn't sell any art, or he's depressed, or he couldn't make any money, or he was struggling, he was having difficulty. Well, he'd been struggling his entire life, and he kind of welcomed it and liked it. So that argument really doesn't work at all. But that whole period of the opposite of Tom Cruise in Jerry Maguire, that whole period of not show me the money was about to start, and was going to start at the end of the Paris period. And so some of you might feel a little bit bored. You might say, how can I put it? This is boring, the Paris period, nothing really happens. It's actually a very important period because it encapsulates the transition from the the decent, properly hinged, mature, proper citizen dude who's got a job, who's respected by his family, who's doing the 9 to 5, right? It's the transition from almost an ordinary mortal to somebody else that is the Vincent that we recognize. So in other words, this year, we see the transition from someone that we actually don't recognize, someone who, as I say, is just like a regular Joe, to someone who is starting to move against the grain of society. No, don't bother paying me for my work. No, it's fine. Well, how many people do you know would do that? Someone who is no longer selling art, but is in a way starting to experience and live in the beginnings of an artistic way, a creative way. He's starting to live out his philosophy rather than just be entertained by it, right? So I just want you to bear that in mind, that although we're going to be going through some of this stuff, and some of it is very preachy and religious and Bible verses, what I want you to remember is the framework surrounding it, which is that he's transitioning now. It's almost like you can either see it as Clark Kent turning into Superman. In other words, Vincent, the ordinary jobber, transitioning into the fantastic artist that would change art, the human history of art, or art history, human art history. So in a sense, the transition of Clark Kent to Superman, right? In another sense, and possibly in a more human sense, you could almost see it in the opposite way. And maybe Van Gogh himself might see it this way, is that maybe instead he's actually transitioning from someone who's, I wouldn't say Superman, but someone who's in total control of his life, who's on top of his game, who's strong and resilient, and he's got his place in society, and things are going super well. And then he makes decisions that undoes a lot of what he's achieved. He kind of gives it away. He gives away his power. He gives away his influence, and he becomes Clark Kent kind of thing. A nobody, an invisible man, somebody that nobody really pays attention to, someone who's overlooked by women, someone who's overlooked by colleagues, and all that kind of thing. So just something to consider. But this period, around about mid-1875, around about this time in 1875 to April 1876, this is the period we're dealing with. This is the period dealing with Paris. Thanks a lot to Batman for that super chat. Thanks a lot. Real Batman says, like Albert Einstein. Thanks, Sharon. Delusions of grandeur, maybe. Yvonne Phillips makes a really good comment there, and it is very much part of the mythos of Van Gogh, which is the struggle, the length and breadth and depth of the struggle makes for good art and creates the artist. I think that's both true and it's to some extent a myth. And what I mean is, a story of a great struggle is a great story. A story of a great struggle adds a lot of meat and potatoes to the artwork that you're seeing there. agree that struggle can refine and strengthen a person, but I don't necessarily agree that you have to struggle in order to be successful. I think a lot of people today think, why is this so hard? But you can sometimes be successful without a huge amount of struggle, if that makes sense. I'm not saying you absolutely need struggle and hardship in order to create something of meaning or significance, right? And I think some artists will say that to you as well. Okay, so we're going to get going with essentially the second letter, because I think I read the first letter last week from Paris. And again, bear in mind, he's smarting a little bit from being unlucky in love. This girl that he was lodging with got engaged to somebody else, and he obviously developed feelings for her. I think that's also quite important to bear in mind, is the circumstances of how he met this girl and the circumstances of him falling in love. It's in a familiar situation where he crosses paths with someone in the sense of sharing the same space or sharing the same home. And the question is, was that so different when he was 20 years old to when he was 37-year-old at Dr. Gachet? Wasn't the same thing. And you could also even argue, did Marguerite Gachet, in a sense, not remind him perhaps of the person of Eugenie, but of the situation where he missed out on, and now, of course, he's an older and wiser and slyer and craftier fox than he was then, right? He's perhaps learned a few moves. Okay, so Nisi says, raised by an artist, not easy, right? Real Batman says, artists don't need approval to know their work is timeless. That's also true and not necessarily true. I think some artists very much have sort of a codependent mentality. They like you hear with the actors, they care what the other one thinks, they care what other people think. And that, I think, is quite important. It's important to know what other people think and to respond to what they think in order to sort of, in a way, stay in their good books, in a way. I don't know if you know, Amber Heard fired her PR representatives. Well, she did that because she cares about what people are thinking of her, and she wants people to think better of her than what her PR folk have done. And she's didn't get to where she is by accident. Part of it is through public relations, good public relations. And obviously what's happening now, this trial, is in a way a battle of public relations. Yvonne Phillips says, true, if you have the gift of inspiration, not much struggle needs to take place. Some interesting examples, I know it's not art, but some interesting examples are Elon Musk and some other, Bill Gates, how they rose to become very, very successful. Did they struggle for years and years and years? They sort of did, but I mean, then they were multimillionaires. You could say they struggled, or you can just say they didn't succeed. I don't know if that's necessarily struggling. Timmy, can I put you down? Because you're sort of in the way. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, so here we go. So these are now a bunch of letters. Every now and then we're going to do this. We go through a bunch of letters, not from Vincent, but from his family. And all of these letters are from Zundert, which is where the Van Gogh family are living. So it's some of Van Gogh's sisters. I think his brother Cor, although Cor isn't really mentioned much for some strange reason. And then his parents, so who's a pastor, a Protestant pastor. So we're going to quickly go through a bunch of letters written by Vincent's family to his brother, right? So we're kind of coming indirectly into this. And they were all written from Zundert in the Netherlands in 1875. We start off with a letter from Reverend Van Gogh to Theo, dated 7 January 1875. It's quite a short letter. I'm glad that she is still together with Vincent, meaning Anna. He's talking about his daughter, who's Vincent's sister. He's glad that they are together in England. And then Mrs. Van Gogh writes to Theo, we are still enjoying the memories of those nice days together. Those were very good days that we won't forget easily. And Vincent being with us that cold evening, and Anna's nice letter arriving when we were all sitting together around the stove. So just a little glimpse at the fabric of the Van Gogh family had its moments where they were a happy family. Then Reverend Van Gogh writes to Theo on the 1st of February. He says, together with Vincent, she had seen Hamlet there and seems to have well enjoyed it all, meaning Shakespeare's Hamlet. So these are all the little references to Vincent in the course of all of their correspondence. On the 11th of February, 1875, also from Reverend Van Gogh to Theo, she, meaning Anna, is happy and feels well placed. She likes her work and gets satisfaction out of it. She's really becoming a very capable person, and she blesses the opportunity of being surrounded by such beautiful nature. She says it gives her courage and force to work and struggle on, and serenity and peace and peace in their heart. Then this is a letter from Anna to Theo, Vincent's sister, to Theo. It's written on the 28th of April, 1875. And this is pretty interesting because it provides a little bit of an insight into things not going so great. So she writes the following. Again, this is Anna, and it's Vincent's sister writing to Vincent's brother, Theo. She writes the following on the 28th of April, 1875. Do you sometimes hear from Vincent? I never do. It seems to me he has illusions about people and judges them before he knows them. And then when he finds out how they really are and that they don't come up to the expectations he had formed too soon about them, he's so disappointed that he throws them away like a bouquet of wilted flowers, without looking whether among those wilted flowers there would not be some that are not quite rubbish, if only they would be treated with some care. So that is quite an indictment from his sister, basically saying, jeepers, this guy judges people too soon, and he's got such great expectations of people, and when they don't meet his expectations, he throws them away, right? And who would know that better than his own sister? And who do you think he's referring to there? Do you think he's referring to his sister there? Do you think he's referring to Eugenie there? Maybe he's thrown her away because remember, they were like living together in like a boarding house, and he wanted to introduce Anna to Eugenie so that he could get to know her. But then, of course, it didn't work out. And now Anna doesn't hear from her brother at all. So you kind of get the sense that, well, Vincent was actually using Anna to get to know or to get close to Eugenie, but now that Eugenie's out the picture, well, now he doesn't really care about Anna. And that, if you think about it, that is pretty mean. For a guy who supposedly got these lofty ideals, and for a guy who is this wonderful, resilient character within vulgarity, well, it's a pretty vulgar thing to do, isn't it? So he doesn't treat his sister very well, does he? Then he says, she goes on to say, I'm really sorry I went to stay with him during the school holidays and was a burden to him. So she's now saying, I had this person experience with him. I went to stay with him. I'm really sorry that I did. So here's some more negativity that is seeping into the narrative. We've seen quite a few letters that are full of poems and poetry and beautiful art. Well, here his sister is really griping, isn't she? She goes on to say, if I would have any reason to foresee that that would be the case, meaning that he would see her as a burden, I certainly would have found some some way to arrange things differently. I did not tell this to the people at home. They think he's a great support to me, and that seems to give father and mother a great sense of relief. Well, the sun shines into my little room too beautifully and joyfully to think about unpleasant things, and still less to write about them. If, however, you know why he is like that to me, I should be very glad if you would tell me. Lest to, okay, so that's that letter. And so you're getting a little bit of a perspective, a little bit of a different perception on Vincent through his sister and through this particular experience. She talks about him throwing people away like a bouquet of wilted flowers, and treating someone like they're a burden to him. And also, it's almost like the message that he sends home is that he's a great support to his sister. Meanwhile, the message his sister gets is that she's a great burden to him. It's quite an interesting thing there. Now, there's a letter from another sister, Liz, to Theo, and it's written, I think, about a month after this other sister's letter. So Anna wrote 28th of April. This one's written 30th of May, so about a month later. Timmy, can you just relax? Okay, let's try and just get him to settle down. So it seems like what the other sister is talking about to Theo is the situation between the other two siblings, between Anna and Vincent. So she writes the following. Oh, if only Anna wanted to, how much she would be able to do for him. I don't understand. She's changed so much. I used to think she loved him so much. So she seems to be thinking, wow, Anna doesn't love her brother and she's changed and she could do so much for him. Then she goes on to write, I've never had the opportunity of really getting to know Vincent well, but during that holiday and at that moment, I realized what he is and what it meant to have such a brother. Theo, I for one, I think we should be proud of him and should follow his example instead of going against him. If only father could hear but once how he talked to us then and could realize the purity of his thoughts, how differently he would think of him. And so you're already getting a bit of there's a change going on with Vincent, and it's causing his siblings to ruminate amongst one another, to, hi, actually, good to see you, to argue a little bit amongst one another. And some of his siblings are supporting him and others are criticizing him. And now there's a letter from Reverend Van Gogh to Theo, their father. It's written on the 9th of July. If with regard to Vincent, we sometimes were worried about something strange in him, this does not mean, you do know that, don't you, that we overlooked all the good qualities he has. There is a kind of naturalness that is blamable. Someone who yields to low passions follows nature, that is to say, bestial nature, but human nature teaches him to dominate those passions. So it's quite interesting that Vincent's father is talking about bestial nature and yielding to low passions. I don't know whether he's kind of referring to Vincent falling in love as this kid yielding to low passions or if it's something else. But he's kind of trying to emphasize we need human nature to dominate these passions that we have, which is kind of true. And if you think about Vincent, there is a bit of a hedonist trapped in him. There is a bit of a hedonist monster that is part of Vincent van Gogh's makeup. And again, is the analogy here with Johnny Depp, the genius that is Johnny Depp and the person everybody loves, and this other human being that has certain appetites for other things. Anyway, Reverend Van Gogh goes on to say, now don't misunderstand me. I don't want to say that I suspect you or Vincent of yielding to those ignoble passions. No, indeed. So he's saying, I'm talking about yielding to these passions, but don't think I'm suspecting you guys. well, why would he be saying it if he wasn't thinking it? Then he goes on to say, but this is the course of my reasoning. A person can sometimes be not natural enough, right? Youth is allowed to be lively, gay, cheerful. A youthful person is allowed to enjoy meeting people who are also youthful, gay, and cheerful. Obviously, in that time, gay meant something else. In those years, it is even a good thing if one doesn't go against one's nature, for there isn't a cheerful mood a beneficial force. Melancholy can be harmful, and to indulge in melancholy does not help to produce energy. So here you're getting a sense of the family's approach to what they refer to as melancholy, in other words, depression. In other words, don't indulge in melancholy. And that family approach is the kind of psychology that would help him in his later life. It's something that I won't say it's indoctrinated, but it's something that they've been brought up. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Be in a cheerful mood, even if circumstances aren't. And his father's kind of encouraging his kids to be sociable. He's saying, a youthful person is allowed to enjoy meeting people. And you can imagine that is something that Van Gogh needs to do. Vincent does need to do that. Then he sort of ends off saying, my dear Theo, you should really think about that. I see that recently your liveliness has diminished. Your cheerfulness is no longer what it was before. So what we're seeing here is actually that Theo as well has changed a little bit as a result of taking this job. He's become less lively, he's become less cheerful. And in a weird way, he's following in the same path as his brother. And his father is saying, stay happy, keep socializing, enjoy yourself, even though you're working. Then there's another letter from Reverend Van Gogh to Theo dated 11 August 1875. The time is near that Anna and Wilhelmina are going to leave us. And then they both went to Welwyn in England. So at this point, there were now two sisters living in England of the Van Goghs, two Van Gogh sisters, Anna and then Wilhelmina. Then Reverend Van Gogh to Theo dated 31 December 1875. So the day before the 1st of January, 1876. How Vincent is going to go on, we don't know yet. He certainly is not happy. I believe it is not the right place for him there. We talked quite openly and discussed possibilities. Yesterday we went to Uncle Cor to consult him he is also a businessman. I tend to believe that I must advise Vincent to ask for his resignation in 2 or 3 months. I tell you this confidentially, and that's in brackets and emphasized and with an exclamation mark. So here on the 31st of December, 1875, which is, I think, 6 months before he ended up going to Ramsgate to work as a teacher for no money, his father's saying, I think I'm going to advise Vincent to quit his job. So he didn't just rashly quit his job. He wasn't happy. He told his dad. His father thought about it. His father gave him advice, and they obviously tried to kind of come to a reasoned decision. In hindsight, was it the best thing that he gave up his job? Could he not have pushed through? It's difficult to say. I mean, Theo did push through, and look at Theo's life. Theo was basically Vincent van Gogh's sidekick. Theo was a very valuable support system, but in terms of his life itself, he didn't really achieve much. He was an art dealer. He was Vincent van Gogh's brother. That is it. Anyway, Reverend Van Gogh goes on to say, don't think I act hastily. I've noticed the signs of the times, seriously noticed them. In the meantime, these are only deliberations. It's not a definite decision. We also keep an eye on God in this matter. May his light give us wisdom and courage to act when we see it necessary. There is so much good in Vincent. That is why it may be necessary to make a change in his position. And so that is, I think, a really interesting conclusion to this letter. This Reverend Vincent's father saying, there is so much good in Vincent, that is why it must be necessary to make a change in his position. So it's almost like his goodness is rebelling against the drudgery of his job. He kind of needs to give a voice, give vent to the side of him, this good side. It's not just being a dutiful son now, it's a good man that needs to manifest that goodness. It's also interesting that the words here where he says, there is so much good in Vincent, this is in December 1875 from his father. And then there's also Liz saying, I think we should be proud of him. And then she also says something about if others could realize the purity of his thoughts, how differently he would think of him. And so this is Vincent's philosophy that is actually breaking through now. His philosophy of life that is starting to come into conflict with his work life, right? Timmy. I actually swam this evening. I swam 1 kilometer, and for some reason, although I broke my rib on this side, this shoulder is feeling a bit sensitive. Not quite sure what that's all about. Okay, so now we're going to go through basically a year's worth of letters. I don't know how long my voice is going to last, and I've only got 1 glass of water left, so we'll see how it goes. I may skip some letters because some letters are very sort of, they don't really take you anywhere. It's sort of just about art, or it's just about God or whatever, and we kind of want some more than that. So some letters, I think we've got to get through about 25. Some letters I might just skip, and hopefully you can trust me on that. If you want to go through them all on your own, or there is a link, maybe you want to copy this link and put it somewhere. Yvonne Phillips says, it is asking a lot if the melancholy is chemical and not just situational. Okay, so this is a letter from Vincent to his brother. Real Batman says there's no Nobel Prize for art. There are quite a few art prizes. Let me just check that. I mean, I know there's like the Pulitzer Prize for writing, amongst many others. There is no Nobel Prize for art. There's Nobel Prizes for physics, chemistry, physiology, medicine, literature, and peace, but not for art. Interesting. Good point, Real Batman. Okay, so I think if there was a Nobel Prize for art, I wouldn't be surprised if Vincent van Gogh would have won it, even if it's posthumously. Okay, so dear Theo, I'd hoped to revisit her before her death, and that is a reference to not quite sure who. Not quite sure who, but what you're going to see is that quite a few people die in this year as well. So you can see how the deaths of family members and other people leads to a kind of accelerated existentialism, right? So that's the first sentence in this letter. I'd hoped to revisit her before her death, but it was not to have been. And then he writes, man proposes and God disposes. So he's already invoking God, right? It's already coming up. Then he talks a little bit about art. He says, in the first box that we shall send to Holland, you'll find a photograph of that picture. and he talks about various artists, and that's the end of the letter. And then he adds a postscript. I do not know how long I will stay here, Nevertheless, I hope to go to Halford before returning to London, and I would like to believe that you will be there as well. I will pay for the trip. You will certainly not forget her or her death, but it is better to keep that to yourself. It is one of those things that as time goes by, we are sorrowful, but always rejoicing. That is what we have to learn. And just a reminder, Vincent van Gogh's 22 years old at the time that these letters are written. Now, another letter written from Paris, 29th of June, 1875. So this is midsummer. Dear Theo, I really want to know if you are leaving The Hague. Is that what you want? 2. Do write me if it is yes or no. Provisionally, I'm staying here, and I probably will not go to Holland before the autumn. In the first box that goes to The Hague, you will find a little parcel for Halford. Please forward it after looking at what's in it. Then he talks about a couple of paintings. One is funeral procession through the cornfields and horses before a plow in the rain. He goes on to say, I don't know whether I've already written to you about it or not, but there's been a sale here of drawings by Millet. When I entered the hall of the Hotel Drouot, where they were exhibited, I felt like saying, take off your shoes, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Now, can you see that his psychology is becoming very sort of concerned with holiness and things of God and that kind of thing. In other words, that is definitely creeping into his vocabulary. It's creeping into his thoughts, right? He goes on to say, you know that Millet lived in Greville. Well, I do not know whether it was at Greville or Granville that the man whom I told you of died. However this may be, I looked at Millet's drawings of the rocks of Greville with extra care. There is now a picture of his at the Luxembourg, the church at Greville, adieu. So now he's even looking at paintings of churches. Let's see if I can bring them up for you guys. Rocks of Greville, Millet. Let's see if I can find it. Quite interesting. So here's a link to that. And let's see if I can find the other one. The church at Greville. The church of Greville, Jean-Francois Millet. So Millet was one of the artists that really influenced Van Gogh. It was one of the guys that he really admired. And so he's also going to admire Millet's interest in churches. And so here he is interested in a church. I'm talking about the artist. The artist Millet is interested in this church scene, and so is Van Gogh. And where is that going to take him ultimately? Okay, so now on to the next letter. It's under a letterhead, Goupil and Key. It's written from Paris, 6th of July. I don't know if I'm going to spend too much time on this letter. It's just it's kind of a business letter. It's written to Theo. He says, many thanks for your letter. Yes, my boy, I thought as much. You must let me know how your English is getting on. Have you done anything about it? If not, it's not the end of the world. So it sounds like, I'm not sure whether Theo needs to learn English in order to do business with the London branch, or whether Theo's got to be prepared to go to London. I don't know. Then he says, this is what Vincent says, I'm renting a little room in Montmartre. I'm sure you'd like it. It's small, but it looks out over a little garden full of ivy and Virginia creeper. I'll tell you what prints I have on the wall. Now, I don't know whether Vincent living in Paris and living where he is in Paris, I don't know whether he would not be, I think he would certainly be tempted by ladies of the night. Whether he was actually giving into that temptation, I don't know, but it's definitely an interesting question. Then he talks about the prints he has on the wall of his home. So the one is called The Bush by Ray Stoll. Then there's another one, and then there's a Bible reading by Rembrandt, and then there's a long description next to that. Let's see if I can bring that one up. So these are books, these are paintings that he's actually got hanging on the wall of his home, or prints of paintings. So let me put this one, Rembrandt. I'm not quite sure which one it is. Rembrandt's Old Woman Reading. It could be this one. It could be this one. It's what comes up when I do a Google search. I'm not 100% sure. Is Stephanie in the house? Good to see you. Stephanie, I think, said that, Stephanie said she might be available on Saturday for the review of CrimeCon, a bit of a debrief. So we'll confirm that a bit closer to the time. But welcome, Stephanie. So he talks about a painting by Rembrandt called Bible Reading, and it's a large old Dutch room. It's evening, a candle on the table. So it's not that one. A young mother sits reading the Bible beside her baby's cradle. An old woman is listening. It reminds me of, verily I say unto you, where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. It's an old copper engraving as big as Le Buisson, superb. So you can see exactly where his thoughts are going. They're going very much into biblical themes, biblical kind of motifs. I think it actually, I wonder if it's not this one. No, it's not that one. Is it this one? Old Woman Reading. Because it's actually a young woman reading the Bible. So, although it's not this one, I'm going to just put it there anyway. It's is this by Rembrandt? No, it's not. Okay. Just trying to see if I can find it here. There seem to be so many. I don't see a baby in that picture. Okay. Well, I'm going to put a link to this picture. I don't think it's this picture either, but I'll just put it there so you can see something that's similar, but it's obviously not that one. Okay, so then he just names a lot of other paintings. It would be actually good to go into these. There's paintings called A Washerwoman, The Christening, The 4 Hours of the Day, The Dawn, and so on. And then he says, so he lists all of these paintings. He says, anyway, my boy, look after yourself. You know how, be as meek and mild as you can. Sorry, let us always remain good friends. Goodbye, Vincent. Then 15th of July, 1875, dear Theo, Our Uncle Vincent visited us here, and I saw him often and talked about a heap of things with him. I asked him if he saw any chance of getting you a place in a store in Paris. At first, he wouldn't hear of it, saying that you were too valuable in The Hague. Then, after I insisted, he said he would think about it. He will certainly come to see you while he's in The Hague. He's not going to change from his dullness. Let him say what he wants. It will do no harm to you and won't do you any harm when you need something in the future. Don't talk of me unless you need something. He is very, very clever. When I was last here last winter, one of the things he said to me was, supernatural things I may not know, but I know everything about natural things. Then he goes on to say, I do not know if those were his exact words, but that is the meaning. I can also tell you that one of his favorite pictures is Lost Illusions by Gogh. Saint Beuve said, in most men there exists a poet who died young, whom the man survived. And Musset said, know that often a dormant poet is hidden within us, always young and alive. I think Uncle Vincent belongs to the first group, so you know whom you are dealing with. Ask him squarely if he can arrange for you to have authority here or in London. Thank you for your letter that came this morning and the poem by Rückert. So you've got these brothers exchanging poems between them. Do you have a copy of his poems? I would love to get to know them. As soon as I have a chance, I shall send you a French Bible and The Imitation of Christ. This was probably the favorite book of that lady painted by blah, blah, blah. Father wrote to me once, you know that the same mouth which said, be as harmless as the doves, and straight away added, and as wise as a serpent. And then that's a quote from Matthew 10, verse 16. Keep that in mind and believe me always, your loving brother, Vincent. So yeah, he's already kind of quoting Bible verses to his brother. So that is to the extent that he is, you can say, being taken over, that the sort of religious fervor is kind of bubbling up, right? It's something that is starting to take hold of him, right? Next letter, 24th of July, 1875. Would you guys like to see a copy of the letter? I don't know if I can actually bring it up. There's an actual copy of the letter, and I think it is drawn a little doodle on it. He's drawn something there. See if you can see this. So he writes the following. Dear Theo, a few days ago we received a picture by Denetti's, a view of London on a rainy day, Westminster Bridge and the House of Parliament. I used to pass over Westminster Bridge every morning and evening and know how it looks when the sun sets behind Westminster Abbey and the House of Parliament, and how it looks early in the morning and in winter in snow and fog. When I saw the picture, I felt how much I loved London. Still, I think that it is better for me that I left it. Now think about those words. You know, he's actually describing this almost epic experience, seeing these incredible buildings in different settings, summer, winter, snow, dusk, dawn. It walked across these settings day after day, month after month, season after season, and he sees this picture and he feels, wow, I actually really loved London. But then he says, well, it's actually better that I'm not there anymore. Well, it's because he loved someone else that was there. And that was too painful when that was no longer going to sort of continue. So that is kind of why he left London. And so maybe he feels he's kind of got unfinished business there, that he liked England, but his interest in someone specific kind of spoiled that experience. Then he goes on to say, this in answer to your question, I certainly do not believe that you will be sent to London. Then he adds, thanks for the springtime of life and At Midnight by Rückert. There's obviously a poem. The first is very beautiful. The latter reminds me of September night. Yesterday we sent a box to The Hague in which you will find what I promised you. I hear that Anna and Lisbeth are at home. I should like to see them. Be as happy as you can and write to me soon. With a firm handshake, your loving brother, Vincent. Okay, next letter, August 1875. So it seems like he's writing 1 to 2 letters a month. Dear Theo, I wanted to write you earlier. I'm happy that Father has accepted the nomination at Eton. So his father's going to move to be a pastor in Eton, and there's going to be some pretty interesting fireworks there, I think, when Vincent goes and stays there with them. Anyway, that's later on. He says, I think it right that he just writes W, but I think that's for Wilhelmine, and A, I think that's for Anna. Their sisters are leaving together. I would have liked to be with you all that Sunday when you went to Helford. Did I write to you that I spent the day with Sook and his family at Ville-d'Avray? I was surprised to find 3 pictures by Corot in a little church there. So he went into a little church and he found paintings there. Last Sunday and the previous Sunday, I went to church to listen to Dr. Bercier. I heard him preach on all things work together for the good of those that love God, and God created man in his own image. It was beautiful and noble. So obviously, Vincent's going through a real church phase. He's going to church. He's getting very caught up in it, right? Then he even says to his brother, you should go to church every Sunday if you have the time. Even if the preaching is not good, it is better to go. You will not regret it. So he's saying to his brother, you must go to church. And even if the preaching's crap, it'll be good for you, kind of thing. Then he says, have you been to church to hear the Reverend Mr. Zubli? And then he provides another list of engravings in his room. And he says, now he's got the Nativity, he's got the Imitation of Jesus Christ, and a couple of other paintings. So you can see that's actually hanging in his bedroom. He goes on saying, I'm trying to get another engraving of Rembrandt's Bible reading for you. If possible, I will send it to you in the first box of pictures. And then he signs off that letter. Now it's an undated letter from August 1875. Dear Theo, thanks for your last letter and the poem by Rickert. Last Sunday, I again went to hear Mr. Bercier. He had chosen this text. Happy is he whose life is all thorns. Think about that. He goes to hear a sermon where he's told, happy is he whose life is all thorns. And he thinks this is fantastic. So what I want to convey through that is Vincent, who sees suffering and to some extent martyrdom in a way that is like, that it's wholesome and that it is heroic. And it's something to be admired. It's admirable, right? So he's kind of gone from almost this idea of, I want to be a respectable dude working as an art dealer. He wants to go from being respectable to being, in a way, it's almost beyond that, admired for his heart. And maybe that's overcompensating because Eugenie didn't see him as a person of any substance, if you know what I mean. And so he's now trying to be more, he's trying to be more, become more. Then he says, I know that Uncle Vincent really likes this phrase, young man, rejoice in your youth, and that your heart is made content by the days of your youth, and live like your heart guides itself according to your eyes. But understand that for everything God will make judgment. Take away the chagrin of your heart and put away malice. For youth and adolescence is not in vain. But remember your Creator during the days of your youth, before the bad days come, and the years arrive when you will say, I don't have any pleasure. For me, I find the following phrase better. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this will give pleasure for all men, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. And then he talks kind of about some other engravings and so on, and then that is that letter. So can you see how almost like the entire substance of his letters are now dealing with, we are now at letter number, I'm not quite sure. Well, I'll put a link to, I think it's letter number 35, but I'll put a link to it. So like almost the entire substance of his letters is now something to do with Christianity that has really caught his attention and inspired him, right? Even things related to art and poetry, but it's sort of going more into that sort of area. Yvonne says, I like how often he closes his letters with a firm handshake, very gentlemanly. Stephanie, did you get the link to that? Okay, so now okay, cool. So now we're going on to the 1st of September. That's the first day of spring in South Africa, but it's, I guess, the first day of autumn there, around about that. There's actually a little painting there, Pilgrims at Emmaus. I'll put a link to that in the description, in the chat. Dear Theo, this morning I received from Uncle, from Father, and from you. Let me read that again. This morning I received from Father and from you the news of the death of Uncle Jan. News of this sort makes one repeat the prayer, unite us, O Lord, close together, and may our love of thee strengthen that bond. So this is at least the second death that is spoken about in a couple of months. And so the whole sort of cycle, someone dies, then there's a funeral, then you must go to church, and then you sort of come into contact with God and thoughts of God and prayer, and so it's all kind of mixing together, right? Then he says, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So Van Gogh right now is saying the whole duty of a person is that you must fear God, okay? So you can tell that this is really taking over him. He's starting to really change as a young man, right? And at this point, he's still 22 years old. And so he says, in the first box of pictures going to Holland, you will find some lithographs and the engravings after Rembrandt that I mentioned to you. You will surely like the 2 lithographs after Bonington. At the same time, I shall send you a few photographs of pictures by Jules Breton and Corot for Father. I shall write on the back for Helfort. I never heard of the painter Pinus, whom you write about. I should like to see the picture you mention. I don't know that lithograph after Diaz's A Monk either. All of these seem to be kind of religious themes. Let's see if I can locate that one. A monk. No. Last Sunday, I was at the Louvre. It says, on Sunday, I generally go there or to the Luxembourg. I wish you could see Van Ostade, his own family himself, his wife, and I think 8 children. They are all in black, the wife and daughters with white caps and kerchiefs, that's handkerchiefs, in a stately old Dutch room with a fireplace, large oak panels and ceiling. So you can see, despite his interest in the divine, he hasn't lost his interest in art. So in a weird way, they're going to come together, the divine and the sort of artistic thing as well. A throbbing sun, isn't he saying that's the source of creation? Isn't that the light of creation? Isn't that light divine, right? from a certain perspective. Then he talks about the Rembrandt, the Men of Emmaus, which I wrote you about, has been engraved. Do you ever visit Boucher's home? His mother is, I think, a real lady. Then he talks a little bit more about that. He asks how his business. I know how difficult it is sometimes, but try to be as useful as you can. Best wishes and write soon. Always your loving brother, Vincent. And then there's a postscript to that. I'm not going to read it. And now on to the next letter. Written just 3 or 4 days later from Paris, 4th of September, 1875. Dear Theo, I'm enclosing my letter for Mother's birthday. Please include it with yours. I bought the book about Michel with etchings after his pictures. As soon as I have finished it, I will send it to you. Yet Michel is not nearly so beautiful as the landscapes described in Adam Bede, which impressed us both so much. There is also a painting by Bonington, which is almost it, but not quite. When you have a chance and have finished the book, please lend it in my name to Uncle Corb, but I want it to be yours. I see the pictures themselves, so you may as well have the descriptions and etchings after them. Compliments, best wishes, and that's how he signs that one off. Now, what I want you to think about is the substance of what is nourishing Van Gogh's heart and mind and soul. What is it that he is preoccupying himself with as a young man, right? And the answer is art, poetry, the Bible, and not only that, he's actually sharing his experiences with that art, and also photography to an extent, is sharing those impressions and feelings with his brother and vice versa. So there's this constant reinforcement of seeing a picture, sending it to his brother, the description of it, his brother responding, coming back, him responding, reading a poem, sending it to his brother reading it, responding, maybe saying a different poem, things in a biblical sense which to some extent resonate with their father, but both brothers were brought up by the same pastor, so that's also resonating, and all of these things kind of mixing together in some kind of magical sort of spiritual cocktail. But it's like ongoing. They're constantly seeing new pictures. And these aren't just, it's not like two brothers reading comic books. It's not like two brothers reading pornographic magazines. It's not like two brothers reading mainstream magazines. It's two brothers that are very focused on art that is meaningful to the human condition. It's art that appears in museums, right? And it's poems that are written by well-known poets in different countries. And so they've actually got a very eclectic upbringing in the sense that they are young men that are eating, sleeping, breathing, and probably dreaming. All of these creative visions from all these different other inspired people. In other words, it's this furnace of inspiration that they are eating, breathing, and sleeping, right? And you can kind of almost get the sense that, isn't it inevitable that with this diet for the heart and mind and soul, you're going to produce something interesting, something kind of amazing, right? Fadicus, thanks a lot for that. Nisi says such a higher level of thinking. You could say it's a high level of thinking, it's certainly a different level of thinking, but the point is this inevitability of putting your mind on a strict diet of art, paintings, poems of dealing with landscapes and whatever, biblical themes, on and on and on, and all of that together. It's not one person who's doing this obsessively, like going off on a tangent. It is this dude and his brother, and then they're sort of working in this environment as well. So it's this really incredible cocktail of inspiration. You know, it's not like someone is just working in an art store and they think, oh, that's quite a nice picture. They are also caught up. They're really getting caught up in the spirit of that art. And, you know, you can kind of imagine some art folk are quite secular in the sense that they go home and they watch Little House on the Prairie kind of thing. I just mean they leave the art to some extent at home, whereas these guys take it with them. It's in their rooms. It's totally part of their lifestyle. It's totally part of their psychology, right? Okay, so 7th September 1875. Dear Vincent, last spring Vierhuizen died. This is the third person. I thought you knew. He died very suddenly after a few days' illness. He died in hospital with nobody present. I greatly regretted that I was not with him. I had been on familiar terms with him of late. He had read Michelet's L'Amour, you know, I wish I could say it properly, is Bria in the house. Anyway, L'Amour, and also talked about it to me. He loved nature so much and sought the still sadness in it, and that's emphasized. He loved nature so much and sought the still sadness in it. Last Sunday, I heard a beautiful sermon. Jesus wept. Thank you for the lithographs and the book by Michel you promised me. I'm very curious to see them. I've taken your letters to the Borchers, and he talks about a couple of other things, and Rembrandt, he talks about the figure of Jesus is especially beautiful, and then he sort of signs off again. Oh, sorry, that is actually a letter from Theo to Vincent, right? That's a letter from Theo to Vincent. So you can see there's quite a lot of biblical references from Theo as well, right? It's not just coming from Vincent. I mean, he talks about Jesus wept. He talks about Jesus is especially beautiful in terms of a sculpture, and signs of yours affectionately, Theo. Then there's another letter written from Paris on the 8th of September. I think the reply to this letter, Dear Theo, you didn't expect to get this letter back, did you? No, my lad, that's not the way to look at it. Certainly Vierhuizen's death is sad, but sad in another way than you say. Keep your eyes open and try to be strong and brave. Are you sure that Michelet's book was the right one for him? Theo, I want to make a suggestion that may perhaps surprise you. Do not read Michelet any longer or any other book but the Bible till we meet again at Christmas. That's quite a severe admonition to his brother, right? He says, I want to make a suggestion that could surprise you. Do not read Michelet, don't read that book, or any other book, and he actually emphasizes any. He emphasizes it. Don't read any other book but the Bible till we meet again at Christmas. Now, it's only September now, so for 3 months he's not allowed to read anything except the Bible. And he says, and do as I told you, go out in the evening often, dropping in on Van Stockham, Borchers, and the like. I don't think you will regret it. You will feel much freer once you start this regimen. So it obviously seems like it's his regimen. Beware of the words are underlined in your letter. There is still a sadness, certainly, thank God, but I do not know whether we are entitled to it yet. You notice I say we, I no more than you. The other day, Pa wrote me, and this is quoting from what his father said, sadness does no harm, but makes us see things with a holier eye. It's quite an interesting perspective, especially if you think about our sadness in terms of Vincent van Gogh. If you think it's not doing any harm to be sad, but being sad helps us see things with a holier eye. So when we're sad, thinking about Van Gogh's life to some extent, his death to some extent, his art within the context of that, it's allowing us to see things in a kind of a holy sense. And then he writes, this is the true still sadness, the pure gold, but we have not got as far as that, not by a long shot. Let us hope and pray we may get there. And believe me always, your loving brother, Vincent. Well, I must say, I kind of got goose flesh just reading that, because these are really the sentiments of what is going to make this such a great artist, right? It's going to get him where he needs to go. Let me just read that again, this particular paragraph. The other day, Pa wrote me, sadness does no harm, but makes us see things with a holier eye. This is the true, still sadness, the pure gold, but we have not got as far as that, not by a long shot. Let us hope and pray we may get there, and believe me always. And then he talks about youth and adolescence are nothing but vanity. He says that is nearly all true. So keep heart, old fellow, and I shake your hand warmly. Whew. Okay, 12th September, dear Theo. And then he seems to start this with a sort of a poem. I think it's written in German or Dutch. I think it's German. He writes, wings, wings to fly above life, wings to fly above the grave and death. So what I've said in this letter is that, in this live stream, is that these letters start to evoke God, but and also talk about death. And it seems to me this is Vincent's approach, his attitude to how to approach life in the face of death. In other words, Vincent's wandered, perhaps naively, into London, is experienced the trauma of unrequited love, and he's trying to make sense of his life in the aftermath of that, the loneliness, that raw feeling of, someone who you really had feelings for is now living happily after with somebody else. And now what do I do? What do I do with my life? Where do I go from here? And so he does start to find meaning in these rich symbolic structures that are to some extent biblical and to some extent created by other artists and poems. But that is his answer to how to deal with the anxieties and frustrations of life, is to find meaning, right? And this is how he's finding meaning. And is it going to work? Is it actually going to fulfill him and satisfy him in satiating those feelings of frustration and anxiety and so on? So anyway, so he talks about wings, wings to fly above life, wings to fly above the grave and death. He says, this is what we want, and I'm beginning to understand that we can get them. Don't you think Father has them? And you know how he got them? By prayer and the fruit of prayer, patience and faith, and from the Bible that was the light on his path and a lamp ahead of his feet. He's saying, basically, I'm beginning to understand how to fly above the grave and death, right? He's saying, by prayer and the fruit of prayer, by patience and faith. He talks about the Bible as a light on your path and a lamp ahead of your feet. He says, this morning I heard a beautiful sermon on the theme, forget what is behind you. And you kind of get the feeling that for some or other reason he needs to do that. Forget what is behind you. Have more hope than memories. What there has been seriousness and blessed in your past life is not lost. Wait no longer, therefore, you will find it elsewhere. But advance, all these things have become new in Jesus Christ. Keep heart and believe me, your loving brother, Vincent. And then he adds quite a long postscript. Bear in mind, this is a 22-year-old kid, right? He writes here, if it was true that youth and adolescence are only vanity, of course, if one takes into account what is written above, and if one dreams that a well-employed youth is a treasure, although he breaks off and resumes later, we would have to strive and hope to become men like our father and others. We hope on these too and pray. Compliments to all that may ask after me. And then he talks about some etchings by Rembrandt and this, that, and the next thing. Something just to share in terms of my personal life. I've kind of, for the past how long is it now? Past eight months or so, I've kind of been going through a period of grieving and brokenness in a literal sense, and to some extent healing. And I was kind of feeling the last day or two that I want to get out of this phase. I want to, although this friend of mine who died in October, his trial still hasn't happened. It's been postponed. Although that still hasn't happened, and although my rib is healed, but I mean, I felt some, not pain, but you know, that feeling when you crack your knuckles, feeling a little bit like that while I was swimming, which is not the greatest feeling to get when you're swimming, given what has happened. But I'm kind of in a place where I want to no longer be grieving and healing. I want to go to the next level of the ladder, which is growing, improving, expanding, developing, right? I want to get off that bottom level of the ladder. And so I wonder whether he's not feeling something similar to that. Anyway, we now go to just the next day, 13th September. Dear Theo, okay, I'm not going to read it. It's just sort of not really a very important letter. 17th September. Dear Theo, a feeling, even a fine feeling for the beauties of nature is not the same as a religious feeling, though I believe these two are connected. So you can see how he's fashioning a philosophy for himself, right? Think about those words, pretty sophisticated stuff for a 22-year-old. He says, a feeling, even a fine feeling for the beauties of nature with a capital N is not the same as a religious feeling, even though I believe these two are connected. Nearly everyone has a feeling for nature, some more, some less, but there are some who feel God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Father is one of those few, mother too, and Uncle Vincent as well, I think. You know that it is written, quote, the world passeth away and the lust thereof, and that on the other hand we are also told about that good part which shall not be taken away, and about a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Let us also pray that we may grow rich in God. Still, do not dwell too deeply on these matters. In the fullness of time, they will become clearer to you of their own accord. And just take the advice I've given to you. Let us ask that it may fall to us to become the poor in the kingdom of God, God's servants. Let me read that again, because this is kind of part of his philosophy, his developing philosophy, right? Let us ask that it may fall to us to become the poor in the kingdom of God. And isn't that exactly what he did become? After this point, he would no longer really have a job, no longer really have money, no longer see himself in that way. And he seemed to want to have an experience of life beyond money, which is quite commendable, but also quite difficult. He goes on to say, we are still a long way from that. However, since there are often beams in our eye that we know not of, let us therefore ask that our eye may become single, for then we ourselves shall become wholly single. Not really sure what he means by that. When he talks about a beam, I think he's talking about that idea of, having a plank in your eye and some, things like that. Then he adds as a postscript, you are eating properly, aren't you? In particular, eat especially as much bread as you can. Sleep well, I must go and polish my boots for tomorrow. Now, I think that's a bit of an eccentric statement to make. I don't know whether, like the prayer, give us each day our daily bread, I don't know whether that is sort of gotten him overthinking it, but he suddenly thinks you need to eat as much bread as you can. I don't know if that's really good diet advice, but anyway, he says, I must go polish my boots for tomorrow. So on the one hand, you've got this very high, sort of complicated thinking that is going on, right? Meanwhile, back at the ranch, once he's written a letter, he's going to go and polish his boots and then go to work the next day. Remember, he's a 22-year-old, and although he's got these sophisticated thoughts, the other side to him is quite ordinary. You know, he's a kid trying to make his living somewhere. But nevertheless, that the juxtaposition of those two different things is quite phenomenal. These transcendent thoughts within this totally ordinary fabric. And it kind of shows you, sort of demonstrates that any person in any situation can live an exceptional life and can have exceptional thoughts and can produce exceptional work. The postscript to this particular letter reads, the same is true of the feeling for art. Do not succumb too much to that either. Above all, save some love for the business and for your work and respect for Mr. Tierstick. One day you will appreciate better than now how much he deserves it. No need to overdo it though. Now one wonders whether this advice doesn't apply to Vincent himself. Save some love for the business and for your work. Maybe that's advice he could have taken. 2 days later, September 25th, Dear Theo. So at this point, he's writing quite regularly. Dear Theo, the path is narrow, therefore we must be careful. You know how others have arrived where we want to go. Let us take that simple road too. So in a weird way, these letters to Theo are almost like, it's like he's preaching. It's almost like he's writing sermons and sending them to his brother. I mean, think about that as an opening line to a sibling. Dear Theo, the path is narrow, therefore we must be careful. I mean, it's in a way, it's quite funny. I don't know if it's Latin, but he writes, ora et labora, pray and work. Let us do our daily work, whatever the hand finds to do, with all our strength, and let us believe that God will give good gifts, a part that will not be taken away to those who ask him for it. Then there's a Bible verse. As I say, all these letters start becoming very much a certain thing. And just contrast these letters with the letters he writes from Orvez. You know, they're totally different. I don't know if he quotes a single Bible verse in the entire time that is in Orvez. I'm not saying that he becomes irreligious, just that he is definitely going through a phase right here, right? That is different to other phases. Now he makes quite okay, well, let me first read the Bible verse. He says, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. 2 Corinthians verse 17. Now he makes an extraordinary declaration. You can see he's a very passionate dude. He doesn't believe in things in half measures. He also doesn't do things in half measures. He says, I'm going to destroy all my books by Michelet. I wish you would do the same. And, you know, not that long ago, Michelet was like his favorite author. Not that long ago, it seemed like he said something like, I wish I had the words here, but he said something like, L'Amour by Michelet is the best book he's ever read. Now he's going to destroy all of those books. And he even says, I hope you're going to do the same. Then he says, how I'm longing for Christmas, but let us have patience. It will come soon enough. Courage, lad. My compliments to all the friends, and believe me, your loving brother, Vincent. Postscript. As soon as possible, I will send the money for the frames. When I write to Mr. Tierstick, I will tell him that for the moment, I am rather short of cash. I asked our cashier to hold back every month a part of my salary, as I shall want a lot of money around Christmas for my journey. However, I hope to send it before long. So he's saving money for a journey, okay, to where, one wonders. 27th September. So quite a lot of letters in this particular month. It's written under the Goupil and Key letterhead. It's written in Paris, 27th September. Dear Theo, this letter is also just like one long sermon. I don't know if you want me to read the whole thing. The kingdom of God cometh not with observation. The kingdom of God is within you. The Son of Man is not come to be served, but to serve. And we who want to become his followers, Christians, we are not greater than our Lord. And then he provides Bible verses. I think it's Luke 22, verse 26 to 27. John 13, verse 16. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the poor in heart, pure in heart. Narrow is the path which leadeth in unto life, and those that find it are few. Struggle to enter by the narrow gate, for many will seek to enter and will not be able. Matthew 7, verse 14. My brother now is talking a little bit more directly. My brother, let us be prudent. Let us ask of him who is on high, who also prayeth for us, that he take us not away from the world, but that he preserve us from evil. So this really does feel like a sermon. Yea, let us be, he's now writing even in sort of biblical, what do you call it? In a sort of biblical tone of voice. He says, yea, let us be sober and watch. Let us trust in God and not lean upon our intellect. Let us ask of him that he force us to come in, that he enable us to fulfill a Christian's life, that he teach us to deny ourselves. And isn't that what he did? To take our cross every day and follow after him, to be gentle, long-suffering, and lowly of heart. And isn't that what he did? A path that shall not be taken away, a spring of living water, springing into life eternal. He provides the two Bible verses there. He says, these are the good gifts that the hearer of prayers, the giver of all perfect gifts, will give unto those that pray for them unto him. Then he says, and over and above this, the assurance that there is a Father's house in which there are many mansions, and that when he hath gone and prepared a place for us, he will receive us all unto himself. And for our comfort in life, on the road to that Father's house, the Comforter, that's with a capital C, the Spirit of truth, who shall lead us in truth. And then Bible verse is given there. Yet a Christian's life has its dark side too. It is principally man's work. For those that walk with God, God's friends, God's pious ones, those who worship in him in the Spirit and in truth, are tried and purified, and often have received from God a thorn in the flesh. And is the thorn in his flesh this obsessive attempt to paint, to express himself? He's trying to express these religious feelings. You can see he's feeling really overwhelmed with a spirit that has filled him, and he's trying to express it. And isn't that what he did with the rest of his life? He's trying to express something of his experience of nature through this frenetic pace of painting when he would paint a single painting, but also the pace of all of the painting. So you can see he's quite an excitable personality. Then he writes, blessed shall we be if we can repeat after our father Paul, when I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child. But now that I've become a man, I've put away childish things. And am I become the God, and God hath made me sorrowful, yet always rejoicing. Write soon and give my regards to all acquaintances, and believe me, your loving brother, Vincent. It's quite interesting that the partnership that you get there with sorrow and rejoicing, that the two go together. That Vincent doesn't see sorrow as a terrible thing. He kind of sees it as sorrow and joy go together like day and night, right? Which is true. 29th of September, so he's still on a roll. Dear Theo, boy, be careful. Do not lose your resistance. See things as they are and do not approve of everything for yourself. It is possible to deviate to the right as well as to the left. Think of what Pa has undoubtedly said more than once to you too, The intellect and the feeling must go hand in hand. Cordial greetings and always your affectionate brother, Vincent. So it's like he has a thought and he quickly writes a letter to his brother, right? And then he adds a postscript. He says, I advise you to go out a good deal, but if you don't like to do it, don't do it. You know, I used to not go out so much myself, which occasioned unpleasant remarks many a time. How I should like it if we could have breakfast together or drink a cup of chocolate in my room. Keep courage, old fellow. Don't take things that don't really concern you very closely too much to heart, and don't let them hit you too hard. How about eating bread? Have you tried that? So he's still on the bread diet. In a great hurry, I shake your hand warmly in thought. Another letter from September, the 30th of September, 1875. Dear Theo, with this letter, I'm sending you the book by Michel that I promised you. It's not Michelet, it's Michel. An etching after the Marguerite by Scheffer. So here is a painting that is got the name of a young woman that he's going to meet 15 years from now. And is that something that is in his subconscious? Is that something that when he hears her name, that's going to bring thoughts to him, or is it not going to? But anyway, in the very first line of this letter, he talks about an etching after the Marguerite by Scheffer, a lithograph after Corot, and a packet of chocolate. I know quite well that your life is not easy just now, boy, but stay firm and keep up your courage. It is sometimes necessary not to dream, not to sigh. You know, thou art not alone, but thy Father is with thee. With a firm handshake, your loving brother, Vincent. So, yeah, Vincent is playing the role of the supportive big brother. Yeah, Vincent is playing the role of knowing that his brother's not going through an easy time, but reassuring him, encouraging him, supporting him to stay firm. And that role would later be reversed. Then he says, please keep the etching after Rembrandt that goes with this letter, blah, blah, blah. Something about till father and mother are well settled at Eton, and then send them. That'll be at the end of November. Letter from Vincent to Theo, 6th of October. So written about a week later. Dear Theo, although I've written you recently, I send you the following because I know that sometimes rough obstacles arise on our path. Courage, old son. After the rain, good weather. Keep hoping for that. The rain and good weather alternate on the road, and then he emphasizes the following. The road that goes uphill all the way, yes, to the very end, and one rests also from time to time during the journey that takes the whole day long from morn till night. Think on this now and in later years. This also will pass away. Jules Dupré liked to repeat, one has one's beautiful days, let us believe it too. Today I have the opportunity to send a parcel to Anna and Wilhelmine in England. I have sent them notably The Imitation of Jesus Christ and some separate fragments of the Bible published in a collection of the Psalms, which I have sent you. Read them with assiduity, quite a big word. Assiduous is if you persistent. So he's really just saying, read these things with persistence, don't give up. Do you want also the 4 evangelists and some epistles, which are published separately? So his brother's really going like 100% is, reading psalms and hymns and whatnot. And then he says, I would like to have a hymn book in Dutch. If the opportunity arises, send me the least expensive edition that you can find. I already have the psalms. There's some very beautiful English hymns, for instance. And then he sends the following. How long is this? Wow, it goes on and on. Okay, so he writes the following, and this is a hymn. Thy way, not mine, O Lord, however dark it be, lead me by thine own hand. Choose out the path for me. I dare not choose my lot. I would not if I might. Choose thou for me, my God, so shall I walk aright. The kingdom that I seek is thine, so let the way. so let the way that leads it to be thine. Else I must truly stray. Choose thou for me my friends, my sickness or my health. Choose thou my cares for me, my poverty or wealth. Not mine the choice. In mine or great things or small, be thou my guide, my strength, my wisdom and my all. He also writes, oft in sorrow, oft in woe, onward Christians, onward go. Fight the fight, maintain the strife, strengthened with the bread of life. Let your drooping hearts be glad, march in heavenly armor clad. Fight nor think the battle long, soon shall victory tune your song. Let not sorrow dim your eye, soon shall every tears be dry. Let not fears your course impede, great your strength, if great your need. Then he says, best regards, how is Caroline van Stockham? Give her my kindest regards. Your loving brother, Vincent. And then there's a thing at the end. Does the road go uphill all the way? Yes, to the very end. Will the journey take the whole long day? From morn till night, my friend. What's interesting with those hymns are they were actually English hymns. So what he's writing there is the original English. It talks about the bread of life, drooping hearts be glad, march in heavenly armor clad, etc. 11th October 1875. Wow, when are we getting to 1876? Dear Theo, thanks for your letter I received this morning. This time I would like to write you in a way I seldom do. I propose in particular to tell you in detail how I live here. Okay, so great. This is a nice departure. So he's basically saying, now I'm going to write to you in a different way. So he says, as you know, I live in Montmartre. In the same building, a young Englishman has his lodging. So he's living in a suburb in Paris. He says he's also employed at the store. He's 18 years old. He's the son of a London dealer of paintings. He had never left his paternal home before he came here, and he was very rough-hewn during the first weeks of his stay. He eats 6 to 8 sous worth of bread, morning, noon, and night. NB, bread sold in Paris is very good, and supplements his meals with several pounds of apples or pears. He is as skinny as a toothpick. He has 2 rows of solid teeth, big red lips, twinkling eyes, a pair of big ears which stick out from his head, a razor-cut pate, black hair, etc. At first, everybody laughed at this young chap, even I. But bit by bit, I grew to like him, and I assure you that at the moment, I'm glad to have his company in the evenings. He has a naive and unspoiled heart, and he's very good at his work at the store. Every evening, we go home together, we eat a little in my room, and then I read aloud every evening, mostly from the Bible. We would like to read it from one end to the other. In the mornings, usually from between 5 and 6, he comes to wake me up. We have breakfast together in my room, and we leave about 8 for the store. Lately, he's eating a bit more reasonably, and he is now collecting prints, which I'm helping him to do. So he's kind of giving Theo a little bit of a reality insight. So he's kind of been talking in very sort of broad, symbolic, non-specific terms. It's very sort of floating type writing, and now this is really down to earth. He's kind of saying, this is what I do every day. I'm hanging out with this dude. He's quite an oddball, but I've gotten to like him, and we read the Bible together, and we like eating bread, and these are our habits, and that's the reality of his life. So in a way, his life is humdrum, but his thoughts are kind of in a different dimension in a way. Then he says, yesterday we went to Luxembourg together, and I showed him the pictures that I liked the most. In truth, the simple people know things better than the intelligent ones. And then he makes a list of the pictures he likes. By Breton, Alone, Benediction of the Harvest, Recall of the Gleaners. And then he goes through a whole long list of other paintings. Church at Greville by Millet, Spring and Autumn, The End of Winter, The Churchyard, Lost Illusions, Christ in the Garden of Olives, Ploughing, etc. It says, also the picture, I cannot recall the name, of a convent where the monks receive a stranger and suddenly perceive that it is Jesus. On the wall of the convent is written, man proposes and God disposes. He that receiveth you receiveth me. He that receiveth me receiveth him that sent me. At the store I do all the work that is given into my hands. Old son, we do this work all our lives. Give me the power to consecrate my strength. Did you do what I advised you to do? Get rid of the works of Michelet, Renan, etc. I think this would give you peace of mind. However, do not forget the piece by Michelet about the woman's portrait by someone de Champagne. Similarly, do not forget Renan, but throw away their works. So he's saying, don't forget them, but throw away the actual books. If you have found honey, mind that you do not eat too much and become disgusted. You read that in the book of Proverbs or somewhere like that. So literally what Van Gogh's doing is he's coming across things in the Bible and he's taking them literally. And he's giving his brother, for example, orders saying, this is in the Bible, and so I'm telling you to do that. So please do it. So, for example, he says, if you have found honey, mind that you do not eat too much. So it sounds like he's saying the honey is like this book by Michelet. Well, in order not to eat too much and become disgusted, throw it away, and then you'll remember what you need to remember. We had 37 people in chat. That's not bad for where we started at like 9 or 10, down to 36. But still down from our high numbers of 50. So anyway, a change of diet stimulates the appetite, provided that we take care to look for a plain food, because it is not written for nothing. Well, that shows, I must say, that shows I'm on his wavelength. He says, it is not written for nothing, give us this day our daily bread. So he is really taking it really literally. So you can kind of see there's a little bit of folly of youth going on here. It's a little bit of a case of the serious young man being too serious, right? He says, I hope you'll pardon my telling you these things. I know you are intelligent enough to find them out for yourself. Don't find everything all right. Learn to distinguish for yourself between what is relatively good and evil, and let that feeling show you the way under God's guidance. For boy, we need God's guidance so much. Look for light and freedom and do not ponder too deeply over the evils of the world. That's emphasized. Do not ponder too deeply over the evils of the world. Write again soon and in a little more detail. My compliments to everybody, especially Mr. Tierstig. Adieu, believe me always, your loving brother, Vincent. Wow, I'm starting to get a headache going through all of this. And I never get headaches. The 14th of October. When are we going to get to 1876? Let's just have a look at chat. Sophomoric, according to Axie, breathing underwater. Axie says there is so much intellectual understanding for him at this phase. It's hard that, yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Dear Theo, just another few words to cheer myself as well as you. I advise you to dispose of your books and advise it still. This is like his third time he's mentioning it. Be sure to do it. It will give you peace of mind. But at the same time, be careful not to become narrow-minded or afraid of reading what is well written. Quite to the contrary, such writings are a source of comfort in life. And he underlines that, or he emphasizes that. And I think he did later on say that he saw his artworks as almost like religious sermons. Van Gogh said that he saw his art as giving solace. He goes on to say, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, and if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. And that's a translation from the French. Seek only for light and freedom and do not immerse yourself too deeply in the worldly mire. How I should like to have you here to show you the Luxembourg and the Louvre, etc. But I have the feeling that you too will be coming here one day. And he would. That is true. I've had quite a good letter from Anna. I'm sending it on to you, but please let me have it back when you've read it. Father once wrote to me, do not forget the story of Icarus, who wanted to fly to the sun, and having reached a certain height, lost his wings and fell into the sea. You may often feel that neither Anna nor I are what we hope to become, and that we will still lag a long way behind Father and other people, that we lack soundness and simplicity and sincerity. One does not become simple and true overnight, but let us persevere and above all have patience. He who believes does not hasten. Still, there's a difference between our desire to become Christians and that of Icarus to fly to the sun. To my mind, there's nothing wrong with having a reasonably strong body to make sure you feed yourself properly. And if you feel very hungry sometimes, or rather have a good appetite, then eat well. I assure you that is what I do often myself, often enough, and above all used to do. Especially bread, in my opinion, my boy, and don't be too shy about it. Bread is the staff of life. And now I'll write again soon and about everyday matters too, for a change. So he's actually saying, let's put this stuff aside a little bit. Write to me about everyday matters, what is actually going on in your life. So he hasn't lost his practicality. He says, take care of yourself. Give my regards to anyone who asks about me. Let us hope we see each other in a month or two. I shake you warmly by the hand and am always your loving brother, Vincent. So quite a big jump. It's around about a month later, 9th of November, 1875. Dear Theo, it is again time for you to hear from me, but it will only be a short note today. I've not much time as I'm very busy. Thanks for what you sent me. I'm very glad to have it. I'm glad for our parents' sake as well as for yours that you were at Eton on the day of the ordination. So I think their father was just ordained to sort of the handover that he can kind of be the pastor for the congregation in Eton. He says, you must tell me all about it, about the ordination. Uncle Vincent and Aunt left again yesterday. I saw quite a bit of them. To my great regret, I did not see them off at the station when they left. Enclosed is a note for Uncle telling him how it happened. We are in autumn. I suppose you go for walks often. Do you rise early? Me, I rise regularly at a good hour. It is an excellent habit to get into. The new day is so delicious. I've learned to like it. Most of the time, I go to bed at an equally good hour. Every morning, my worthy Englishman prepares oatmeal. How I wish you could be here some morning. I shall write more soon. Anyway, that's the sign off for that letter. And then about a week later or so, it's a letter from H.V. Van Gogh, to whom it may concern, dated 14th November, 1875. Maison, Goupil and Key, H.V. Van Gogh, blah, 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 Brussels. The undersigned declares that Mr. Theo Van Gogh has been employed by our house from 6 January of the current year until today, and that I have every reason to express my entire satisfaction with his behavior, as well as with his zeal he has given evidence of during this period of time. Brussels, 14 November, 1875, H.V. Van Gogh. So basically a commendation letter for Theo's good work. 15 November, 1875, Dear Theo, enclosed is a note for Uncle Harnabeek. I had not written since Annette's death and felt a strong urge to do this. Do you call on them now and then? At all events, you will take this note yourself, won't you? Every morning, my dear Englishman prepares oatmeal. His father sent him 25 pounds of it. I wish he could taste it with us. I'm so glad that I met this boy. I've learned from him, and in return, I was able to show him a danger which was threatening him. He has never been away from home, and though he did not show it, he had an unhealthy, though noble, longing for his father and his home. It was the kind of longing that belongs only to God and heaven. This idolatry is not love. So you can kind of imagine Van Gogh is sort of taken this guy under his wing, but he's kind of overdoing the thing. I mean, imagine you missing your parents and your roommate tells you, enough with this idolatry. Anyway, he says, he who loves his parents must follow their footsteps in life. He understands this now clearly, and though his heart is sad, he has the courage and the desire to go forward. As Father already told you, as he often did me, keep your heart with all diligence, because the heart is an open door to life. Then let us do so, and with the help of God, we will stay on the right path. Good luck to you. Believe me always, your loving brother, Vincent. The heart is an open door to life. 4th of December, 1875, Dear Theo, a few words in a hurry because tomorrow is St. Nicholas Day. It is such a pleasant day in Holland. I should like to celebrate it once more. I am looking forward to Christmas, aren't you? We shall have a great many things to talk about. It is a pity that Anna cannot come too. I hope she also will have pleasant days. Christmas in England is very interesting, and perhaps Anna will learn to love her surroundings better if she celebrates the holiday there and helps to make things pleasant in the house. So kind of a little bit of funny feelings seems to be between Vincent and Anna. He's saying, perhaps Anna will learn to like her surroundings better if she celebrates her holiday there. My dear Englishman, Gladwell is his name, is also going home for a few days. You can imagine how he longs to go. He has never been away from home before. Is it as cold in Holland as it is here? With our little stove, Gladwell and I are very comfortable, morning and evening. I've taken to smoking a pipe again, and I enjoy it as of old. Compliments to everybody who may ask about me. A warm handshake from your loving brother, Vincent. So he started smoking. And remember, he smoked a pipe in the last moments of his life as well. 9 December 1875. Dear Theo, this morning I heard from home what had happened to you. Thanks, yes, to zeal. Thanks to Vincent and Nick. Yeah, I suppose I had some zeal when I wrote my 100 books in 7 to 8 years. Thanks a lot, Yvonne. Appreciate it. Okay, so, dear Theo, this morning I heard from home what had happened to you, and I wanted to write you at once. I wish I could do something for you. One of these days, a box will be sent to The Hague. I'll put some chocolate in it for you. Gladwell calls that consolation. I will also send you the book by Jules Breton, at least if I can get it back, as I lent it to somebody. I'm anxious to know how you are. Write soon, and please give me some details about how you spend your days. So what had actually happened is Theo had fallen on a slippery street and seriously hurt his foot. So that was the injury that happened to Theo. So his brother says, I'm going to send you some chocolates. And then he also says, I'd like to be with you, Theo, but what can I do? It cannot be helped, boy. In a fortnight, I shall go home, and then we will certainly see each other, and our meeting again will not be the less delightful for the accident that has befallen you. If you see Uncle Jan, please remember me to him and thank him for his letter. You must try to become good friends with him. I don't know him well, but I know he is pure gold. It has been very cold. Fortunately, the thaw set in yesterday. I was very glad of it. So probably it's been snowing and the sidewalks are frozen, and that's why his brother fell. I'm rather busy these days with the inventory and finishing things off before my departure. And now, Theo, a warm handshake and wishing you a speedy recovery. So he's talking about his departure. I think he's really just talking about his departure to go away for Christmas. He's only going to leave his job 6 months from this point. And I think after he's spoken with his father. 10th December. Dear Theo, herewith I send you the things I promised. I'm sure you will like the book by Jules Breton. One of his poems titled Illusions struck me in particular. Happy are those whose hearts are so tuned. All things work together for good to them that love God is a beautiful sentence. It will be thus for you, and the aftertaste of these difficult days you will certainly find agreeable. But write me how you are feeling soon and tell me when the doctor says you will be well again. That is, if you have not done so already. 2 weeks from today, I hope to be in Eton. You can imagine how I'm looking forward to it. I think it should be, did I already tell you that I have taken up smoking a pipe again? I have found in it an old faithful friend. I believe that we never more will separate. Uncle Vincent told me that you smoke too. Give my very best love to the Roos family. Both of us have enjoyed many good things in their house. Then he talks about a picture called Sunday Morning. He says, you know it, don't you? It is a village street of cottages and barns, and at the end is the church, surrounded by poplars. Everything is covered with snow, and little black figures are going to church. It tells us that winter is cold, but that human hearts are warm. Best wishes, boy, and believe me always, your loving brother Vincent. Then he says, the packets of chocolate marked X are for you, the others are for Mrs. Roos. Smoke the cigarettes together with the rest of the family. Adieu. So quite thoughtful, sends his brother some chocolates and some cigarettes. I'm trying to get to the end of 1875, then I'm going to call it a day in terms of these letters. I was hoping to get to the end of the time that he leaves in mid-1876, but it's just too much to get through. But we'll start around about the 1st of January, the 6-month period between when he leaves Paris, when he decides he's going to leave Paris and when he leaves Paris, and then him going to Ramsgate. And that transition should be quite interesting. Anyway, he says, I was looking forward to the letter I received this morning, and I'm very glad you're recovering. Your parcel was only sent today. The little book by Jules Breton is in it. I'm longing for Christmas and eager to see you, boy, but it will be soon enough now. I think I shall leave here a week from Sunday in the evening. Try your best to get as long a holiday as possible. And now there's another thing, which I hope you will pardon my mentioning. You have found the poems of Heine and Dueland are beautiful. Be on guard, old son. They are dangerous traps. The illusion is of short duration. Do not abandon yourself to them. So now he's warning his brother not to read certain poems because they're dangerous traps, right? He says, don't you think it would be best to put away those little old books I copied for you? If later the books of Heine and Dueland fall into your hands again, you may reread them with other feelings and a more serene heart. And then he talks about all sorts of different things. I'm not going to go through that. And then he says, just now we have a beautiful picture by Schreier, a wagon with horses in an autumn landscape with the setting sun. Also a beautiful Jacques, a melancholy landscape with sheep. How do you like that small Jacques ploughing that has been in The Hague for some time? And then he signs off on that letter. Oh, and so the next one is the 10th of January. It's so weird. I've got like something in my eye, and yet I actually swam, so I'm not quite sure what's going on. Anyway, so this is the last letter I'm going to read, and then we'll continue with this on Sunday. Dear Theo, I've not again written to you since we saw each other. Meanwhile, something happened to me that was not entirely unforeseen. When I saw Mr. Boussaud again, I asked him, His Excellence, if he approved of my being employed in the house for another year. And he told His Excellence that I hoped that he had nothing serious to reproach me with. But alas, it was the case. And His Excellence has forced me, as it were, to say that I would leave on 1st of April, after having thanked the gentlemen for all that I might have learned with them. So he goes back to Paris after Christmas and asks if he can work there for another year. And it seems Mr. Bousseau basically says, no, you can't. And Mr. Bousseau says, can you please leave here on the 1st of April? And I could be wrong, but what could have happened is, in his enthusiasm in terms of the Bible and so on, in his fervor, he kind of stopped doing his job. He kind of got so distracted and so excited by, the things that he was paying attention to, that his bosses weren't very happy, that they weren't very happy with what he was doing. And so, in other words, he wasn't focusing on his work. He was kind of daydreaming kind of thing. And so he comes back from Christmas and his boss says to him, basically, you're fired. Please be out of here in about 4 months, right? And you can imagine this has got to be devastating. Like, he didn't want to resign. His boss basically said, you're not cutting it, and I've had enough, kind of thing. And so he says, His Excellence has forced me to say that I would leave on the 1st of April. So he doesn't want to leave, but now he's kind of being forced to leave. Faticus says, great show today. Thanks a lot. Nisi, thanks also. May Batman's Crusade get you the Nobel one day. Well, that'll be good. For what, though? But I appreciate it. So he goes on to say, I'm about to sign off here, he's about to say, when the apple is ripe, a soft breeze will make it fall from the tree, and such was the case here. I have probably done things that in a certain sense have been very wrong. That is why I've never made a big thing to answer back. Well, my boy, I'm not at all clear what I should do next, but we shall try to maintain hope and courage. So in a way, it's kind of embarrassing. The older brother's been sermonizing to his brother, giving his brother advice, and the older brother's actually lost his job. And his younger brother will go on to maintain his job for something like 15 more years. His brother, Vincent, only really kept this job for about 2 years, 2 or 3 years. And then he never really worked again. You've got to think that this must have come as a bit of a shock, that in the middle of his daydreaming and being so idealistic, someone was actually looking at this and going, jeepers, I'll need to get rid of this idiot, And so, so I'm not going to take it further than that. The next letter is also written from January, but we're not quite sure when. So obviously, this is the moment where he realizes, okay, I've got to now come up with another plan. I've got to get a job somewhere else. And so what does he do? He decides to go back to England. And do you think that is going to work out? And then if the answer to that is no, then he comes up with another thing. And do you think that works out? And then he does something else. And do you think that works out? And so on and so on and so on. And so I think you can, in a weird way, you can kind of say that Vincent's life was pretty well, he was in a pretty good position here. He was working in Paris. He kind of had a pal. I don't think he was as happy as he was in Den Haag, but he was in quite a good place. But he kind of messed it up by sort of daydreaming and getting very caught up in stuff, and ultimately lost his job. And so he then tried to pick up the pieces, and he never really did. He did something with the aftermath of that. But this is where, really at this point right now, is where his life the struggle part of his life, the strain. This is the part where there's a departure from Vincent. Vincent's life departs from that of his siblings and from most other people, where he starts to live the life of a poor person, where he doesn't think money is important, where if you think he's idealistic now, he gets even more idealistic, right? And so he kind of gets worse and worse as a person who is trying to be an asset to society. Remember you said, I don't want to be a Frenchman or a Dutchman, I want to be a human, I want to be part of humanity. And that is going to cost him dearly. That is about to cost him dearly. Well, I feel like I've really been speaking for a long time, for like 2 hours straight. I guess I have, but I can feel it. I must say, I've done a couple of lives longer than this, and of late I've gotten one super chat of like $5 or whatever. And I must say, I seem to get so much more super chats just from the handful of you that are here, and I must say I really appreciate that. I don't do it for the money, but it obviously is nice to be appreciated. It's nice to see that you guys appreciate what we're doing. So that does mean something. So thank you for that. Actually says it was a real come down, intense day. Sharon says, I couldn't let my sibling go through that alone. Bridget Bowman says, hi, have I missed some of this? But it sounds like Vincent gets obsessive when he's passionate about something to the point where he excludes other things. That you really nailed it there, Bridget. I think he is a very passionate dude, and he does kind of overdo it. But I guess you could argue, can you overdo art? And many people will say that you can't, but Gogh was one of the people that I think did feel that way. Gogh was like, cheapest dude, slow down, calm down. You don't need to finish the painting in one day, in one go even. And, you know, so they didn't really get along very well. Paddy, thanks so much for that. Yes, to the next phase of your life, Nick. Thanks a lot. Positive, peaceful, successful, and blessed. Yeah, I appreciate that. I don't know if that's the next phase. I'm thinking the next phase is growth, but I see it more in kind of a physical sense. But if it's success, that's, I guess, also fine. But I'm kind of more preoccupied with wanting to be physically strong and well. And with that, I think will come feelings of well-being and happiness and all that. So, okay, guys. Real Batman says, I'll fill my Google Play card. Okay. So anyway, good to see so many mods here. Sharon, Stephanie, oh, just you two. I don't know where Jean is, and I don't know where. It looks like there's so many mods, but like every second comment is from a mod. But good to see you guys so interactive and so interested. We're missing Bria tonight, and Jean Karras, and Sky, and so on. But I'm sure we'll see you guys again. But yeah, members, thanks for making it. And we'll see you guys again Sunday around about this time. I've got to dodge power failures. At the moment, we're having 2 a day for like 2 hours, and sometimes they happen and sometimes they don't. But nevertheless, I've got to try and dodge them. So if I do like a disappearing act either in the middle of a show or I just don't pitch up, it might be because there's a power failure. So that, just bear that in mind. Yeah, the swimming pool is at the gym. It's definitely not in my backyard. Stephanie says, looking forward to sharing my experience. Cotton Star is giving too many spoilers. Yeah, I must say Cotton Star's videos have been really interesting. I'm quite shocked that they're not exploding all over YouTube, but obviously something else is. I did mention earlier, did you guys know that there were 586,000 people watching, I think it's Law and Crime's live stream of the Johnny Depp trial? 586,000. Have you ever seen more people in a live stream than that? Have you ever seen like 1 million? Well, that's definitely the most I think I can remember seeing. Hey, Timmy. I don't know why there's this tightness in my shoulder bone. I don't know if it's got to do with swimming and my rib. I don't know, but it certainly is a bit odd. Stephanie, I will obviously send you the StreamYard link before Saturday, but we'll communicate directly about that before the time. Okay, you can see Timmy is pretty tired. Timmy thought that my voice would give him ASMR, but alas, maybe it was too fast, and so it actually kept him awake. Timmy's ready for bed. Yeah, maybe, could be. Salt water would help that shoulder pain. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks very much for the super chats. Thanks for your interactivity and your interest. And I'll see you guys, and you'll see Timmy Saturday. So take care until then. Cheers. Hey, you're tired.